I just want to add one point there. One of those recommendations is the state should have a bigger budget reserve. You know, and that makes a lot of sense from my perspective, but from these folks and you, should the state be sitting on a bigger reserve? Should it be sitting on more of your tax money? So you can see the kind of conflicts that they have to deal with in the, if the budget reserves get too big, then we're not happy because there's too much of our money sitting around. So.
Will or Jim, would you like to comment? Jim Carlson?
I want to go back to what Bill said when he was speaking about the forecast and some of the assumptions that are made to it, and the possible, let's say, the externalities of those assumptions. The fiscal cliff is a big deal for the forecast. Let's say that we would have let all of the tax cuts expire, and you would have been paying more federal income tax. Well, your federal tax is deductible on your Minnesota taxable income. So suddenly, Minnesota taxes, you would have paid less in Minnesota taxes, and that would have hurt the ability of Minnesota to balance its budget. And now the tax cuts that happen, that makes more of your income accessible to Minnesota taxes. And the same thing goes for the stock market. And when he said that companies were moving their income, the income that's paid to you in dividends, the income that might be available to you as by selling stock in 2012 would be taxable now in the 2012 year. So that shifts money back and forth over the time that the state has to declare their income taxes. So little externalities like that are very, they make the inaccuracy of the forecast, well, let's say the accuracy of the forecast, very difficult to nail down.
Okay, thank you. We are getting a lot of questions, so we're going to try to move this along as quickly as possible. Are you going to, this is for the legislators, are you going to reinstate the market value homestead credit and have the state pay for it? And we'll start with Sandra Masin.
Oh, thank you. At this point, I think that's a real controversial thing, and I think there will be movement on that. I don't think there's going to be enough support to do it.
Will Morgan?
I don't know. That's a good question. There's been talk about that. There seems to be a great deal of support for doing that in greater Minnesota. In the metro areas, I think some folks are looking at it as if it doesn't have that great deal of an impact on individual taxpayers, so maybe there's a better mechanism for that. But again, that's what the Property Tax Committee and the Tax Committee are going to be taking a close look at. Of course, those are costs. About 5%, I think, of the state's budget. About 8% of the state's budget is for property tax relief programs like that, bringing money in, and then how do you send it back out in terms of tax relief. So those are all going to be considered in the balance of what is the best use of the resources.
Okay, Mr. Carlson?
I would give it a probability of 50% or less, because the governor has, in his budget, he said that we're going to have a $500 per homestead tax credit. So that's his stake in the ground. The market value homestead credit is not favored by a lot of cities. They don't like it, and part of that is a little bit historical in that the market value homestead credit used to be paid for by the state, and more recently it's paid locally. In other words, your next door neighbor is contributing more so that you can get a market value homestead credit. So there's, it's very complicated. I kind of like, from some perspectives, the way the governor has said that we're going to have a $500 tax credit, and because property taxes are quite regressive, this would help lower that regressivity. So I think that it's going to be possibly a combination of the two, but I think the market value homestead tax credit, the way it was before, is probably history.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Representative Morgan. What is the possible impact of closing sources of loopholes for the top 2%?
Could you ask the question again? I'm not sure I understood.
What is the possible impact of closing some of the loopholes for the top 2%?
Okay, I guess we're talking about tax loopholes and deductions that are geared towards the top 2%. Well, some of the impacts are having a more transparent tax system. I think there are a lot of people who are concerned that some of these loopholes and deductions that were set up in years past maybe aren't geared toward present-day economy, or maybe aren't as transparent as other things. If we can, a lot of people in the business community who've talked about eliminating loopholes and deductions to bring rates down. I think those are definitely things that are going to be considered in the tax committee. But without more specific details, I'm not sure I can give a better answer to that question.
Senator Carlson?
Well, I think the governor's budget does increase the tax rate on, and I believe it's about 3,200 people in Dakota County. So he has offered that as his solution to that. Loopholes is something that's a loophole to one is maybe the way they get their money to someone else. And I would say the governor has some areas that he is focusing on, one of them being what they call the foreign operating corporation. He has said that we're going to go after some of that money, and that's really complicated in that a foreign operating corporation is a company that's set up to collect the royalties of something sold in the United States, and then when the money comes back in, it's exempted from some of the tax. So those are some of the loopholes that I think he is going to be going after, and there may be some others that I really have not caught yet in reading the budget, but he is focused on increasing the taxes on those folks that are high income earners, and it's income, it's not wealthy, it's high income.
Okay, Representative Masin.
The question, I think, it comes from an interesting perspective that I had never thought about at this point, and certainly don't have the background. But if we're talking about having, we'll say, clothing starting at 100, my guess is that figure is going to definitely change if we even get to that point. Certainly, I'm thinking for people that are paying more for the higher end clothing, obviously they will be taxed more. So that would be one way of getting money from the higher end income people. But actually, as far as the other closing the loopholes, I think that's more of looking at the various tax cuts.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for all representatives. And there's two questions that I'm grouping together, and I'll read them both from the audience. Please answer yes or no. Do you favor Governor Dayton's proposal to 1, raise sales tax on clothing, 2, sales tax on business to business, and the new 4th tier income tax? And the other question states, will you vote for a tax on clothing, advertising, or law firms? And we will start with Senator Carlson.
Thank you. Those are not yes or no questions. Those are negotiable questions. And I'm going to say the one that I have the biggest problem with is business-to-business taxes. And that's where if I'm a small business person and I need somebody to do my accounting, I'm a one-person business and I'm going to hire somebody to do my accounting, but now I have to tack on money onto that charge that accountant charges me. If I bring that accountant into my company, that tax would be gone. So what it is, and I think that tends to hurt small businesses, and I'm concerned about that. Concerned that might be an unfair tax on small businesses, and it will also it'll be a disincentive for small businesses. The top tier tax, this is something that we're going back to some classic tax rates in Minnesota, and we've had the highest tax rate in Minnesota has been 7.85% now for about 10 years, and I think that's it's time to add back. Hope no new taxes. Let's go back to some of the old ones, and the old ones are when we were most prosperous. I can't remember what the other ones were, but the clothing tax, expanding it to clothing, we do have a reduction in the rate, but broadening the tax. This is something that Jesse Ventura had proposed back in his term, and the legislature said no. And I think, personally, I think there was too many people in the legislature who were running for governor, and they didn't want to vote on that. So, and I think we're probably now, compared to many of the other states in the nation, the 5% is a very common tax across the nation on clothing. Of course, no one wants to pay taxes. I have, my daughter comes here to buy clothing, or let's say whenever she comes here to visit, she buys clothing, and she probably won't buy as much. But I think that is something that, you know, maybe we need to have like a tax-free day, something like that, like they have in Texas. So there's options there. It's not a yes or no question.
Representative Masin?
That definitely is a real tough question, but that is one of the things that we really have to come to a decision by the end of the year. I'm trying to be as open as possible. We know we have a deficit. As I said, I want to get to a point where we have a stable budget. So I'm trying to be as open as possible. I can tell you my dentist doesn't want his services to be taxed, and I've been contacted by a number of business owners, you know, beauty salons, attorneys. They're not excited about that. And then yesterday, some of us met with our county officials. And one of the things that they said is, okay, if they have to start being, you know, if there's taxes on consultants, on many of the services that the county contracts with, that means their budget's going to go up. So are we going to think about exempting local governments from all of these service taxes? So those are things that we need, those are questions that we need to be answered in the next couple of months.
Representative Morgan?
Thank you. I don't have a yes or no answer right now. I don't think we should have a yes or no answer right now. I think people voted for us to go down there and be thoughtful and be thorough, hear testimony, throw a bunch of ideas together, and come out with the best ideas at the end of the session. So I don't have all the best ideas right now. I want to hear from you. I want to hear, what are your concerns about the governor's budget proposal? What are the things in there that you like? What are the things in there that you're concerned about? What are the things in there that you think will help families? What do you think will hurt families? What will help small businesses? What will hurt small businesses? Those are the kinds of things that are going to help me make a better decision in April and May when the decisions have to be made. I don't have a decision on those things right now. I honestly don't. I want to hear from the folks I represent. That's our job. We're here to listen, and we'll be listening.